welcome to this evening's X Talk. Find your place inside. The speaker is about to start. So if you're struggling outside playing basketball, come on in. It's funny when you get people coming in and throwing basketballs towards the stage. That sometimes happens. Okay, we're going to wait for a little bit, but we're going to get started. Just to let everyone know, I'm just going to mute everyone during the presentation, but I'll unmute you all afterwards, and there will be a Q&A as well. So let me just, there you go, give you all a mute. Okay, so just want to start with some housekeeping rules. The first one I've already told you, I'm just muting everyone until after. And if you have any questions, please jot them down somewhere and save them till the end, and there'll be a Q&A. I think we're also going to have potentially some questions throughout. That's correct, Eric, isn't it? Yeah. So, all right, so I'll introduce you to our speaker tonight. So this is Eric Fischer, ladies and gentlemen, and virtual people. Eric Fischer studied business engineering. He's a programmer, and as I just found out, a classical DJ as well. So potentially some questions about that afterwards. So Eric is a process and project manager for digitization at the city of Ravensburg. I don't know why I struggled that much with that word, in Germany. And today the talk's going to be about, will it be possible in the future for government processes to take place completely virtually? And the word I'm struggling with again here, digitization at the administrative level, has a number of stumbling blocks in store. And today we're going to be talking about these stumbling blocks. And is there anything else, Eric, that I've missed out that we're going to be talking about today?
No, that's quite it. Thanks for the introduction.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to step off the stage and it's over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I'm amplified right now. Everyone can hear me?
Correct. Yep.
Perfect. Perfect. Don't wonder, it's the first time for me to talk in VR. Exciting new world for me too. Today's talk, as you already said, is about how could a representation of public administration look like in the metaverse, in the virtual reality. You all might know in Germany we're far behind that, and we won't get there in a few years. But I think that's a very, very interesting thought. So basically, we will discuss the thing later. We will discuss how it could look like, the possible use cases, of course. I'm very curious what your opinions are, what your experiences are. But let me first talk a little bit about the technical obstacles we're facing in digitalizing classic paper processes we have in public administration. Yeah. Okay, so imagine you're moved to a new city, you move to our beautiful Ravensburg, and you have to register yourself the city administration. So instead of taking your way to public offices, you're just turning on your headset, getting into the virtual world, and then entering the office, the virtual office of your administration. Maybe you have to wait for the official, and that's one thing I like the most about VR. While waiting, you could already get up to our most famous site, can watch the city from the tower, enjoy already the place you will live in, maybe learn something, which is obviously not possible in reality. You're just waiting on some seat. However, official is ready, getting to the desk, you take your seat, and often the first thing is taking out your ID. You have to identify yourself, and you're putting it on the table. Let's rethink that. Pull out your ID and put it on a table. How are you doing that in virtual reality? Of course, you can't bring your physical ID with you in the virtual world. We have to find some solution for that. Maybe some of you are thinking about a digital replication of the physical ID we could use. We can solve that, for example, with a blockchain. Would be possible, but I see some follow-up problems with that. So if you have two IDs, one physical, one digital, what happens if you sell your laptop and you forgot you have your digital ID on the laptop? Then maybe the person who bought your laptop is able to identify as you and to steal your identity. So the idea of blockchain is great, but I want to keep that thing aside because we have some other opportunities to solve the problem of authentication and maybe authorization in a virtual world. So think about, how did you get in here? How did you get in AltspaceVR? Most of you might use the Microsoft account. So Altspace, okay, Altspace is a Microsoft service, so it's maybe not the most or the best example, but if you set up Altspace with your headset, I did. I have a Oculus headset. I got a code displayed in my headset in a virtual world, which I had to enter my desktop, and I logged in on my desktop on a Microsoft side. Microsoft told Altspace, yes, that's Eric, let him in. So the whole mechanism is called OAuth 2. It's broadly used through the internet. Everywhere you're logging in with Google, Facebook, Microsoft account, or your Apple ID, the mechanism behind is always OAuth 2. And this thing has a lot of power we can use to identify ourselves in the virtual world. Okay, we have to identify before we enter, and the information is basically already there when we get to the desk. So the official doesn't have to ask us for the ID because the information is already available. So that is basically the solution I would go with. Let me explain the whole mechanism a little bit to you, because we just saw how it works in general. But what makes this safer than, for example, the blockchain? First of all, you just have one ID. You have your physical ID, and in Germany, we already have a NFC tag in our IDs, which we can use with a card reader, which might be our smartphone, and to sign contracts. Honestly, that's pretty rare, the opportunity to use that, but it's possible. OAuth 2, by the way, is not implemented there. Let's think about how it could be implemented. OAuth 2 in general is a mechanism, or a standard, I should say, for authentication and authorization. These are two different things. Authentication is just, yes, that's Eric, or yes, I'm Eric. Authorization, yes, I'm allowed to do that. So basically, you have the possibility to restrict people on what they are allowed to do based on their ID, or the other way around, you are allowed, or you can restrict which information flows to the public authorities, which makes this pretty interesting, because when you're now showing your ID, the official is always able to read your place of birth. But he or she really needs that? That's the question. With OAuth 2, you can restrict that. How does it work? basically, okay, it's getting a little bit technical, but let's dive into that because it's very important if we're talking later about how it could look like a virtual representation. We have a client, which is basically a software in this case. We have the user who is interacting with the client. We have a authorization server who is telling, or which is telling, yes, that's him or her, and yes, he's allowed to do that. And we have a resource server. The resource server holds the thing we wanted to access. All those components talk to each other. And this happens with tokens. When you log in to AltspaceVR, Altspace never sees your login credentials. They always are held at Microsoft. Microsoft hands a token to Altspace, so Altspace is allowed to access some resources on the Microsoft server. For example,
Oh, I think we may have lost connection. Is this just me or anyone? Can I see some sad faces if we have? I've got a sad face, Okay. Just making sure it's not my connection. So I'm perhaps, Eric, are you there? Are you with us?
hey, I am back.
There you go, Eric. We've got you back. We've got you back. Yes, you are.
I'm very sorry. It was getting
That's
too
all right.
dark, so.
That's right. Yeah, I have that all the time. You just got to switch a light on. So we were talking about, I think the last thing you left off, we heard was around the Microsoft Altspace in terms of your account information.
Yes, okay.
You good?
All right, thank you very much.
No worries.
Microsoft has your account information, your personal information, hence or gives Altspace possibility to access them with a token, which is called the authorization. Not the authorization code, I'm sorry. It's just an access token. So this is a pretty safe way to give some access for a third-party service, third-party authentication service. That could be used for authentication in social media too. I really like that idea. Unfortunately, in Germany, we don't have it. I don't know if other countries already implemented such a service. But that would be a solution for the problem. Okay, I can't pull out my ID physically in VR and show it to the official. Actually, give me just a second. I have to look on my notes if there's in order that I don't forget something I wanted to tell you. One important thing, which I already talked a little bit about, is that you're able to limit the access of a service to your personal information. As I said before, you have always your place of birth on your ID. And if you hand the ID to an official, the official is able to read that. In Auth 2, we have the possibility to limit that via scopes. So the client, remember that's the application, for example, AltspaceVR, has a limited scope, can't access the information about your place of birth if not necessary. So this way we can restrict the information that flows depending on the authority you're going to, which is in times of German word Datenschutz, the data safety for yourself. It's a nice feature. So I just want to make sure if that was clear to you, the approach I'm recommending.
Yeah. Would you want me to set up the Q&A now? Yeah. If anyone has any questions at this stage.
Just a short Q&A on the topic of authentication and authorization. We'll open the broader discussion later.
Yeah, of course. So we got the raise hand feature is available now. So if anyone has any questions at this stage, just click the raise hand button in the bottom right, which will be available. And I will give you the megaphone and you can ask any questions. Don't be shy if you have any questions. If not, or it just proves that you've done a good job of explaining everything so far. So
or I was too technical. Maybe that.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. Okay, we got some. Yeah, I'll leave it open. If any questions pop up, I will let you know.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
There you go. No worries.
The identification of people is just one thing we have to solve in virtual reality, which is a difficulty when moving classic services of a public administration into VR, or in general, unfortunately, into a digital world, I should say. So I have another really big problem in public administration. That's your signature. If you're signing on paper, it's pretty easy. You're just drawing with your hand. Everything is done. It's legally safe for us and for you. That's legally binding what you're doing with your hand. Totally fine. So most people think if they're scanning their signature, it's also legally binding. In some cases, it is, indeed, but not in all cases, because you have different level of digital signatures, which are the simple signature. By the way, that's a scanned handwritten signature, because that's just an image you place on a document. It is nothing that's legally relevant. Then you have advanced signatures, working with public and private keys behind encryption to ensure that the person who signed is really the person and not just anyone else putting an image on a document. The next level are qualified electronic signatures. What's the difference here? Qualified electronic signatures means that the keys you've got are from a public institution. So they ensure that just you can get your key to encrypt the document and to sign that document. Just qualified electronic signatures are really legally binding. It is important. In Germany, if you want to quit your job, you have to sign it. If the signature is just scanned, it's not valid. You legally haven't quit your job then. Let me explain to you the whole mechanism behind the signatures, the electronic signatures. Then again, we have to think how we can bring that to the virtual world, because we're now more or less talking about the digital world in general. Afterwards, we have to think about how we can make it really useful in a virtual world, in the metaverse. Okay, what we're talking about is encryption, as I already said. And usually signatures are working with public and private keys. So in this case, you encrypt the document. I say, to make it a little bit easier, I say you encrypt your whole document with your private key. You are the only person who owns that key, who can encrypt with that key. And you give a public key with your document to the person who receives your document. So you want the people to read your document, you have to open it, so they need a key. This case, we just want to ensure our identity. We want to make sure that the right person signed the document. We don't want to do some silent and how is it called? Non-public things. That's the reason why the other person has the public key, or quite everyone can have a public key. Important to know is that the document can only be encrypted with a private key. So if you encrypt it with the public key, it is not working. You can only use your key to encrypt. That's the mechanism that ensures that you signed your document. So that's the mechanism behind the advanced signatures. Problem here is everyone can generate those keys. Everyone is able to generate a basic digital signature. And this is not human readable. Key is not human readable. So in Adobe Reader, you can generate your own signature, and then there's something like a stamp with your name on it. Everyone can write your name on such signature. That's not a problem. So that's the reason why we have another stage of signatures, which are the qualified electronic signatures. You have to request them at the central authority, at the central service. You have to authenticate at that service, and then you're able to receive your key with which you're able to sign your documents. Okay, so we now know two technical technical basis behind the most important processes you have to bring to the digital world. We didn't talk about how do we use them in VR. That's now my question to you. I mean, all of you had to go to some public offices. How should it look like in VR? How should we present ourselves in VR? I mean, we're talking about a decentralized metaverse, maybe, hopefully, like the internet. So for me, the interesting question was, or is, how should we represent ourselves? How should we solve those technical, or how should we implement those technical mechanisms to get into the virtual world? But now the Q&A is open, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you.
Yeah, I'll jump up on stage quickly. Thank you so much. Thank you for the talk. I think it's one of those topics that is just extremely complicated. So I think, yeah, the idea of like, I'm sort of visualizing as you're talking about contracts and signatures, I'm visualizing, you sort of handing me a signature, a contract virtually, and me signing it in this space, which I think is one of the things, obviously, we're a lot further away from. There's a lot of mechanisms and things involved to make something like that happen. Yeah, it's an interesting topic, and I think there are a lot of people that will have sort of different opinions on what should and shouldn't happen in these spaces. So I think, yeah, the Q&A is open if anyone has any questions. And we do have a hand raised. We have Robert. I'm going to give you the megaphone, Robert. So there we go. You should be able to speak to us now. Where is Robert? See if I can see you. Robert is top left there.
Let me click on all the messages that have popped up here. Okay, confirm. Okay, yeah, Eric, thanks very much for the discussion. It's really awesome. Just as a level set, I work for a company that has its headquarters, maybe 10, 15 kilometers south of you on the Bodensee. And we actually had, yeah, so I know Ravensburg really well. Lived there for lived in just south a couple of years. We actually had a meeting this morning in our virtual world at AltspaceVR, and one of the topics that came up was exactly this. How do we manage access? Because if we have a company meeting in AltspaceVR, we don't want the whole public to come in, because we may be talking about a new product, we may be talking about problems with the product, and obviously we don't want that to be wide open. I really like your idea with the ID in AltspaceVR as a first way of granting or not granting access to a room. But I'm intrigued by your second proposal there, where we use the digital signatures. So it's a handshake in order to come into a particular conference room or a particular world for a meeting. So that's something I'll take back, but I see that as being very necessary in the enterprise world, to have access control to certain spaces.
Yeah. So if you're interested in this topic, just visit me on my blog. I wrote a whole entry about this mechanism OAuth2 for authenticating people. I really miss that feature in the German ID, because it's pretty easy. It's industry standard to authenticate yourself through OAuth. That would open a whole new world. I mean, they started with the digital ID with extra scanners. You needed additional hardware. Use the NFC tag of your ID. It's embarrassing, honestly. That's embarrassing. Now they're better. You can scan your ID with your phone. Some applications implement that interface that you can sign contracts through that mechanism, but that's still not a good user experience, in my opinion, because you always do some OAuth workflows and you don't even recognize it. So why don't we use that? I really like to hear that that's something the industry needs. Unfortunately, I can't solve this problem. I just work at city administration. That's something the government has to solve, and they're always a little bit slower.
Just slightly, yeah. And I think with Microsoft moving toward Mesh for Teams, that brings the Azure Active Directory in as a possibility for authentication. But a lot of companies don't have that, don't want that. So your OAuth2 is, yeah, I'll take that back to the team and see what we can do as far as a prototype, because that's really intriguing. Thank you.
Oh,
Great
thank
to
you.
hear
Thank you
that
so
this-
much. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
a great.
It's really great to hear
great
that
question.
this might take its way out to the world.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's
Great to hear.
happening quicker than you thought. But yeah, I think I think, to be honest with me, a lot of this stuff is sort of a little bit above my head, but I am really interested with everything I'm doing sort of in the metaverse space as well, around sort of privacy. And a big thing for me is always friction. So I always look at like how much friction there are in the processes of authentication as well. And in the crypto blockchain space, I remember trying to buy some currency recently and running through an insane amount of hoops of authentication and who I was, which involved a back and forth between my phone and computer twice in order to get the image of my passport, so that they could, see who I was, who I said I was. So I think, friction's always a big thing, but then some level of friction is necessary. Otherwise, you get other problems that are happening with people sort of pretending to be someone. So yeah, but thanks very much for that question. And if we have any other questions, feel free to raise your hand. Again, don't be shy. There is no such thing as a stupid question. So feel free to raise your hand if you have any questions. If not, I'll leave it open for some questions for a while, but if not, we can just sort of open up the stage area, unmute everyone, and then if you'd like to come up and talk, just come up on the stage and just join us for a chat. Give it a couple seconds. I'll tell you what, I'll do that anyway. I trust everyone here, so we can open up the stage. And if you just want to come up and talk to us, talk to Eric, feel free. All right, let's unmute everyone now.